This is the Giraffes Don't Eat Steak podcast, a show that brings you marketing stories, tips, hints, and much more. A treat for those who want to succeed in business or marketers who just want to learn. Hello, Javier.
Hi, Erica. How are you?
I am good. Oh, it's so awesome catching up with you again.
Yes. Always good to talk to you.
You know what I was thinking about the other day is
Mhm.
when we met. Do you remember when we met?
Yes, it was Miami like
Miami.
12 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, it's been such a long time. And that was such a nice trip, right? Wasn't it? Wasn't that a
Yes,
good trip? We were trying to understand, or is understand the right word? We were being convinced that television advertising was the way to go and we should implement it in the countries. Do you remember that?
it was, it was like that. We tried to do that here, but it didn't work. It was too expensive, too complicated, and the people didn't accept it that way. They were used to buy other type of products in that channel, but they were not thinking about insurance, less accidental and health insurance. That was it was funny to try,
It
but
was fun. But,
it was a
but
good
let
way of not doing things again.
But come on, we learned a lot, right? We spent a lot
Yeah,
of time learning, looking at other countries where some where they did work and some where they did not work. And but to be honest, we knew, did we? We kind of knew that it wouldn't work, didn't we? Like we were being told, oh, look how wonderful it is in this country, so therefore it should work everywhere. But we knew that every country is different, right?
exactly. And this is something that we knew it didn't work. We had to do it anyway, but we took the experience and the
Yes,
data
yes.
to fight against future ideas of let's do this globally. No, Spain is different. Even is different than Italy or Portugal, which is
Yeah.
markets which should be quite similar, but the same thing doesn't work. Mostly, if you're talking about different regions like Asia, the States, Latin America, doesn't make any sense to try to copy and paste. But as you said, it was really good to know the way other colleagues were working.
Yeah.
Maybe the whole concept didn't work, but it was good to learn about the products. I,
Yeah.
I took a very good lesson for that because maybe the channel was not the right one, but the covers combination or even the scripting to present that
Yeah.
was really helpful for other channels.
Absolutely. And we were lucky enough to have, for example, our Israel colleagues in the mix and our Ireland colleagues in the mix. And actually, for me, the learning on how they manage those massive call center teams was amazing. The internal strategies. So even though the whole concept of broad market, right, that's what it was called, broad market, which actually just meant television advertising. Everyone likes to put their own label on everything. But we learned other things from our colleagues, as you say, which was good, right? So
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
got to travel to Miami. Come on, that was something.
Exactly. We knew Miami, we knew the teams. And it was very good because I'm not sure if you feel the same, but in the last 3 4 years, all we do is Teams or Zoom or
Yeah.
whatever is the channel, but we never meet in person. And when the people is taken to another country, remember we also did Lisbon.
Yeah,
Uh,
Lisbon. That was
you
the
put
last time we met in person.
exact no, in London we
Oh,
met
and
once
in
in
London,
London.
in London.
We met once in London, but once you meet the people, you go out of the presentation. It's not
Yes.
just focusing on what you want the people to listen,
Yeah.
but it's more about building relationship with the people, having the confidence to pick up the phone and call them to discuss doubts, questions, issues, even sometimes for complaining. But this is something that gives you much more insights than just attending to a team meeting 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours. I have some of those. And you start doing something else. And you just say, I'm sorry, my connection is not good. Deactivate the camera and start working doing something different. Probably everybody does the same.
Or when you have multiple screens, right? You can carry on working on another screen and help. I've got glasses, but your glasses aren't as reflective as mine. I forget sometimes you can see in my glasses that I'm looking at another screen.
I was recommended by the optician not to have that. And to be honest, I didn't understand why. But now I see the benefit.
Yeah, you definitely have one up on me. I've learned the hard way. Because as soon as I look away, someone will say, Erica. They'll be like, I am listening, but I wasn't.
But you know how to answer it and pretend that you were listening, no?
You learn the skills, Javier. You learn the skills.
Exactly.
So talking about this personal relationships, because that was part of the problem of trying to implement this television strategy for insurance in your markets, is your market is very much about interpersonal relationships, right? It's
Yes.
much more I was going to say broker driven, but it's much more advice driven, right? People buy insurance by talking to somebody rather than deciding by themselves. Or tell me, it's been a while since we caught up. Has your digital strategy kicked off now?
No, you're absolutely right. Depending on the product, people is more confident, although they make mistakes on buying online. Auto, home, you have these comparison websites, and they show you what they want you to see. So people usually goes to price, and they got the cheapest, and they realize that they didn't choose the right option because they just focus on the price, and they only selected what they were driven to select.
Yeah.
The products that we are selling, which is accidental and health, is exactly as you said it was in the past. Very little has changed since then. The people need somebody to talk to clarify the questions, sometimes even to see the benefit of the product. Once you explain them, they participate in the conversation, they see the benefit, they see what they can be used for. They ask about other covers, they realize that they have something similar, which is not so similar after speaking to you. And this is something that we have not been able to do online. These products are working for people over 30, maybe 40. And this segment of the population, at least in Spain, is used to buy online through Amazon, to book a ticket, to book a flight. But for insurance, apart from auto and home, they are not so confident to do that.
Yeah.
So we still are selling through brokers. We still are selling through telemarketing. Remember that telemarketing, since I started working in that many years ago, I'm not going to say how many, they say that telemarketing is dying, but still the sales are being done through telemarketing because this is complex products that has to be explained to the people.
And are you still outsourcing your telemarketing, or do you have in-house now?
No, outsource.
Outsource, yeah.
It is more flexible, and in the end, it's cheaper because if you have internal staff, the process is complicated to downgrade or upgrade the campaigns because of internal approval processes, onboarding, and so on. So it's better to work with.
And you've got staff that need work, right? So if you're paying someone a salary, they're going to want full-time work, whereas telemarketing campaigns ramp up and down depending on the seasons, right?
Exactly. What we do, and I think this is something that we want to expand it, is not to rely just in one call center.
Yeah.
We have different platforms, even within the same company, but we have different sites in the same company, and also we put them into competition with other companies.
Okay.
Because the results improve. You know that after a while they say, no, this is it has been optimized. The team is loyal to the company. Blah blah blah. But in the end, you go to a limit, and that never goes up.
Yeah.
Once you put somebody else in competition, suddenly there is something new, and they started to be creative, and the results start to improve again from what was already good. So we always put them into competition, and we give them the forecast for the next 3 months, depending on the campaign, of course. But it is okay. We have this volume available. If you reach that limit, you will get 70%, 80%, 50%, and we do that. And depending on who is doing best, the one that is doing best is getting the best or the biggest volume for the next 3-4 months. So they have time to. We don't want to move and to be tied to just one vendor, because that gives you confidence, but also they tend to relax. And if you relax, you don't get the most of you. Sorry, the best of you.
And it's easier for A/B testing, I think, if it's, two different approaches. If you want to test that, it's interesting because couple of episodes ago, I had Owen Richards on, who runs a telemarketing company. So he was on the podcast, and obviously talking from that perspective of, how he needs proper briefs and how he needs detail, etc. But it's really interesting also to talk from the business owner's perspective, which is what you're sharing now, to say, well, how do you manage your risks? Because if you go with just one and they flop, then you're at zero, right? You have nothing.
Exactly.
And I mean, I remember the budgeting processes we had to go to. If you have a flop, it's really hard to get more money. It's really hard to say, oh, I know this flopped, but please let me try again. Whereas if you have an A/B test and you've balanced it and you can see signs of life in one, it's then easier to go saying, okay, this was a flop, but look here, this one has signs of life. Can I then continue the test, right? So it's also about managing that risk. Do you agree?
Yes, and actually you avoid having to have this waiting period.
Yes.
If you have more than one vendor approved and set up and running, you can do this test very quickly, because first of all, they have been approved, the contract has been agreed, and that takes a long time.
Long
You know
time.
that all this
Yeah.
certification is not the easiest of the process. But also, just because they know that if they are not quick or good enough, somebody else might take the business. They are, of course, everybody has to make money. This is business, and the vendor has to make business also. But they review their implementation process, timing, and cost, and they are more flexible to make sure that they do the A/B test. They are more reliable in terms of how do they present the results, and mostly, and which is something that has been missing in many of the vendors, they are proactive.
Yeah.
If you are the one telling them how to do things, what to do, that is a huge amount of work for you, and in the end, you end up doing the same forever. They have other customers. They are the expert in the market in the end. So
Absolutely.
they need to give you some ideas about how to progress.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, that was part of the discussion with Owen as well, was, they are the experts as the business owner. If you're going to go in telling them what to do and ignoring the expertise, then you only going to get what you're going to get, right?
Exactly.
You have to give them some leeway to use the expertise to improve your campaign, because it's in their best interest to do so as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you need to build. We were talking about personal relationships. Um, I think it applies the same with the vendors.
Yeah,
If it is just tied to the contract, you are very much limited. You need to build a trust relationship with them. So they feel like they can talk to you openly about because maybe you can propose something which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So they also have to tell you, I could do this way. I simply wouldn't do that because we have tried in other market or in other client and it didn't work. So you save time, you save, or even though if you do the test, you do it in a more limited way.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work, you minimize the losses,
Yeah.
and you don't lose the confidence of to make further test, launch, and to be creative also on your side.
Absolutely. Very, very good point.
Mm.
So in terms of how you work, the one thing that I've often gotten stuck with is reporting. And you can either get too much data, right? That you actually becomes meaningless. It's just reams of numbers. Or sometimes we worked with a vendor who just didn't give us enough, right? Like we just got bottom line sales figures or just like limited information. And you're like, well, what do I do with this? What is your guide for the right amount of data or reporting to get from your call center?
Depending on who's reading those reports. I mean, what I do when we are onboarding a new call center, any new vendor, but in this case call centers, I ask them which are the standard reports that they use, because
Okay.
if I tell them to use my reports, most probably they will be using theirs, and they are not comparing the information, or they are simply sending the reports to me without double checking.
Okay.
So I like to understand how do they measure the business, which KPIs, which understand them as a useful contact, for instance. Something that is supposedly the same, it is considered in a different way. So once we understand how do they calculate that, we have a set of reports. One is the summary, which is the one I look at, to be honest, to see the evolution of months, weeks, and so on. But also there is more detailed reports to see how do they use the dialer, how is the database comparing. I receive those, to be honest, I don't look at that. I just need to make sure that they are looking into that and they can explain the information. And also for the people in my team, they are more useful because they are more in the day-to-day activity. They are visiting the call centers. They need to understand what is happening. What we try to do is not showing them how much we know about the business. We try to tell them to explain the results, because that way they are forced to look at the numbers. If I receive the report and explain to them, nothing's going to change because they will continue not looking into that. So what I do is that I try to minimize the development, and the only yes or yes is the summary. The other ones, if they have something similar that is covering our reporting needs, we are more than happy to accept that one.
Okay. I was working with the contact center about a year ago, and I was fascinated. Well, number one, they didn't record their calls, which...
What?
Yes, it was
Sales call
mind-blowing to
center?
me. Yeah. So that was number one, which was like a no. And then the second one was that they didn't report on... So their reporting was only sale or no sale. They didn't report on rejection reasons. And it fascinated me because surely that's where the learning is the reasons people have said no, right? And they didn't. They basically gave you a report with sales. That was it. And sales and dials. So that was a really big gap, because dials can be the same lead for 50 times, right? It doesn't tell
25 million.
Doesn't tell you anything, right? So basically they reported on dials, number of dials, and then sales. And nothing afterwards and nothing in between.
And no recording at all, so you cannot match that.
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, I didn't work with them. I inherited them. and then I moved on. But for me, the power, I mean, how do you even run a contact center? Number one, if you don't have recordings, how are you monitoring your staff, right? So other than the compliance and legal reasons, let's not even go down that route, but how are you monitoring the quality of yourself? And you and I did a lot of work on quality assurance together, right? In terms of, you know, not only the compliance aspects, which from an insurance perspective, the regulator, and we had, right, not in our markets that we worked in, but in other markets, huge fines for compliance. Not actually stating the covers properly, etc., etc. And if you don't have a recording, you've got nothing. But just how your customer is being treated, how do you monitor that part of the conversation if you're not having quality control and therefore the recording, right? But then how do you even improve or know that your staff is doing it if you don't have any other reporting? Like, it blew my mind.
No, and nothing to check against that, because as you said, I mean, you can have the most wonderful database, the most wonderful script, but if you cannot monitor or even prove what the agents are doing, you're totally lost.
Yeah. And for, you know, just improvements, because all the time we were improving. We're improving our script, we're improving our product. We fed back to product development saying, you know, and you use those non-sales reasons going, look, in the last month, 50 people have said they want, and that's how we got things like, I don't know what we called it. I can't remember what we called it with you, but in the UK, we called it teledoctor. You know, it was feedback from our clients saying, no, we want this virtual doctor or doctor online or whatever. We want that in the product. And that's how we then pursued the business case, because we had data to back up our request. So there's so much value in collecting that data that it doesn't even make sense to me that someone wouldn't do it.
No, and actually in collecting it even properly, because we have had issues that everything goes to other. So other has to be empty or less than 1% of the reasons. So if something, if there is an unexpected increase in any of the parameters, but mostly in others, we ask for explanation to the call center. And the team leader and the supervisor has to explain that, because they, in their job description and even in the goals, they have, in the incentives, they have a percentage of accuracy in wrap-up call. So they need to make sure that they monitor their team are using the right code, because that way we can trust that information and react based on that. You can check if the database is not the right one, if the script is not the right one, the product, or even if the agent, if somebody is receiving all the I cannot afford and the rest of the company doesn't, maybe there's something wrong in the agent. But I think what you said was crucial. You need to make sure that you have information in a way that you can manage.
Yeah.
You don't want to have 2,000 reasons, but you need to have that information. You need to trust that information, and you need to use that to improve.
Yeah. Actually, I hadn't thought about what you said now about the trusting the information. So having that extra step in place for someone to do the quality control to make sure the agent is choosing the right reason and not just the first one in the list, right? Because that's human behavior. Even, you know, when we did online purchase, where did you hear about us? We knew how many people would choose the first one in the list, because that's human behavior, right? Like, so we didn't really trust that information because most people chose the first one in the list. But for call centers, if you're making decisions based on that data, you have to put in a quality control step to make sure that you fighting against the laziness of human behavior, right? So yeah, that's
we do that. So we do include that as part of the training. When we are launching a campaign, we explain the product, we explain who is the company, we explain why we choose that product, but also when going into the more technical aspect, like explaining them the system that they are going to use to make the calls.
Yeah.
That part of the training is given by the call center, but also we participate explaining why we choose these reasons for not buying and
Yeah.
what they have to put into each of them. But of course, we need to make follow up because, as you mentioned, the people is lazy and they tend to use the first two ones.
Excellent. Yeah. And so your controls are important. And what you're saying is interesting. I've been working for the last 2 years now, I think, with a very junior marketer. And one of the first things I had to encourage her to do was to communicate her campaigns to the sales team.
Yeah.
And as you're talking, and for me, it was so natural. You never launched a campaign without that conversation, right? In terms of why are we doing it? Who's the target audience? What are we expecting? What's the result? It must have a target. Maybe we were overkill in our days, but we had those numbers to a T. We're expecting this many calls with this return, with this many sales, and any variation on that, we needed to know why, right? Why wasn't it meeting our parameters? But we spent a lot of time before the campaign making sure our sales teams were ready and primed. And it's always interesting to me to talk to marketers who just don't do that. They just launch campaigns, whether it's social media campaigns or they just launch it and don't bother telling anyone. And I find it really odd.
Do they have any success at all? Because probably it doesn't, no?
It's an interesting one. I think some of the time it's because everything's too generic. And this is another bugbear of mine, that we spent a lot of time really focusing on target audience and who is the person who would buy this, who needs this. And we did business cases on this, right? So that's our training. But the new marketers coming in, it's quite generic. A lot of what they do is we sell to everyone, and so the campaign is generic, and so everything's generic, and so therefore maybe that's the reason they don't need to brief the call center or the salespeople, because it's all generic anyway. But even there, then are you even doing a campaign? Is that not just a brand strategy, right? If it's not targeted, not specific, not focused, is it a sales campaign? I don't know. I think it's
No,
brand. It's different, right?
I think you're right. And maybe at the beginning you can do like, I mean, maybe you don't know who is going to buy the product and you need to validate that your assumptions are correct. So at the beginning, maybe you can be more open on the profiling, but you need to collect information and make sure that you narrow that one because the cost will be reduced.
Yeah,
And as we were discussing before, the results will be better. Maybe you're happy with the results, but you shouldn't be happy. You should be reviewing that and try to improve them. That's what sales is about, no?
absolutely. Absolutely. And thinking on your feet, I was talking to my friend the other day. I was remembering when I did a broad market campaign, television advertising in Turkey. We launched in Turkey. Um, and 2 days after the ad went live, it was also accident and health. There was I think it was a train accident, and many people died, and we had to pull the ad because it was insensitive, right? It was just so insensitive to have television advertising talking about
Yeah.
people dying in an accident, right? And there we were. And I that it never recovered. I think we never went, like, we were just, and all that work and effort, but you have to think on your feet, right? I suppose we could have been insensitive and just left it, but it was the wrong call. It would have really killed the reputation of the company. We would never have made the sales for the campaign. But I don't think it ever launched again after that. I think it was way too sensitive. So you also have to think on your feet with these campaigns, right?
Yeah, and no, and it is a problem, but I think you're right. That you need to stop those things. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but in October we have a huge flow in Valencia
Yes.
in the coast. So there was a lot of people dying. Of course, we were not doing any campaign to
Yeah.
those people. There was voices against that, say no, the people now is conscious, but the business is conscious, but they need to be thinking about rebuilding their lives.
Yeah.
So probably it's not the moment to associate your brand to this type of distribution. My idea is that the company should be helping the customer. If you try
Yeah.
to make profit of such a catastrophe, your reputation will not be, at least, will be a bit damaged. So I prefer not to be
Yeah.
part of that.
No, and I think you're right. There was a word fear mongering, right? A lot of insurance marketing in particular was about fear mongering. And actually, if you think of COVID, that's what happened, right? The whole get the vaccine and the whole the app and log where you are and all of that was fear mongering. We were terrified. And I did some work with the company that built the app, the COVID app here in the UK. And they were trying to sell the technology to other people, which it was brilliant technology, but no one would do it. No one was downloading the app. And I'm saying because they used fear to get people to download the app with COVID. No fear. Why would you download the app?
Exactly. If you are afraid, I'm mongering people. They are afraid and they buy you because they're afraid. I couldn't trust a brand doing that.
Yeah.
Here is very common with the house alarm companies. They
Okay.
have these ads where you have the kids on its own, and it is afraid because everything is dark and they hear a noise. I mean, this is good for the movies, but I don't want my products to be associated to this type of distribution because if you're not explaining things well, the people will go to whoever is offering something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Javier, I think we could probably talk about this for ages, but it's been so
Yes,
awesome catching up with you.
was very good talking with you as usual.
Okay, we need to arrange a face-to-face catch-up really soon. It's been too long, right?
Correct. My next trip to London will be probably after the summer. We need to make sure that we meet and we have a proper coffee, drink, dinner, whatever it takes.
And a hug. I miss a hug.
Exactly. Good to talk
Any
to you, Erika.
any last words, voice of advice, anything you want to share with our audience?
Nothing. Just to say
Nothing.
I'm delighted to talk with you, and we can repeat anytime you want.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Javier, and I'll see
Thanks
you
very much.
soon.
Take care. Bye bye.
That wraps up this episode of Giraffes Don't Eat Steak. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found value in our discussion and got some new ideas to apply to your own business. Tune in next week for another round of marketing insights and inspiration. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate you listening. Catch you next time on Giraffes Don't Eat Steak.